Continuing the conversation on birds, we're going to discuss the skeletal system of the bird. As I said before, as a requirement for flight, the skeletal system is strong and lightweight. The bones of the bird are filled with air, and what you see in this cross section is these large air cavities, and then intermixed with these air cavities are reinforcing struts to allow it to have strength and yet light weight. The cross section shows that these struts act as supporting beams to hold the bone up. The sternum of the bird has a blade-like attachment called the keel, which is an extension of the sternum, and this keel allows for the attachment of the powerful pectoral muscles which are necessary for flight. The skull of the bird, as stated previously, is also quite lightweight. The beak is made of keratin, and this keratin is a protein much like the nails of a human. The bird has a cranium. The atlas is the first cervical vertebrae that holds the head up. The axis is the second cervical vertebrae that allows the head to turn. This is a larger picture of the skeletal structure of the bird. The humerus in the bird, which is right up here, right here, is a short and powerful bone that allows for powerful contraction of muscle. This then attaches to the elbow, and then you have the ulna and the radial bone. And then the bird has what's called a alula, which is the thumb, which supports a group of 3 feathers that are important in flight. The muscular system is fairly straightforward. The biggest and most powerful muscles in the bird are the pectoralis major and the pectoralis minor, which attach to this keel in the chest. The pectoralis major is the powerful stroke muscle required for flapping, and the pectoralis minor is required to raise the big wings back up for the next stroke. The nervous system is specifically as well designed for flight. The brain is divided into 3 parts: the cerebrum, which is here, the cerebellum, which is back here, and the brainstem, which is down here. And some interesting parts: the cerebellum is very large in comparison to the cerebrum, and that's because coordination is extreme. The cerebellum is responsible for coordination, and coordination is extremely important. The optic lobe is extremely large, supporting the significant eyesight that the bird has to have. The senses, particularly the eyesight, is very strong. The ear is sensitive to pitch as opposed to volume, which means it can recognize differences in pitch so that different songs which have different pitch, the bird can recognize. Vision is also extremely important. It's more superior. The vision is superior to mammals. And again, it's related to the size of the optic lobe in the brain. And especially predatory birds have very keen eyesight. The eye has a third eyelid, or transparent eyelid, known as the nictitating membrane. We will be repeating this over and over again because crocodiles have nictitating membranes. Several different species across various orders have nictitating membranes that allows the bird to keep its eyes open, but then the eye is still protected. The bird can recognize coloring patterns in UV light that are called nectar guides that help the bird to recognize various flowers. The digestive system in a bird has to work very hard because a bird has a very high metabolism. This is because flying is a very high energy activity, and therefore the bird has to eat a great deal of food relative to its size. They have specialized bill designed to scavenge or find whatever they need in nature And you can see these different kinds of bills depending on the kinds of things that these various birds eat. The digestive system of the bird is fairly simple. It has to rapidly digest food to provide the energy needed, but also food in the GI tract is essentially dead weight. So it has to digest the food quickly, get rid of it so that the bird's weight is not impaired. The crop, which is right here, once the food enters the gullet, goes down the esophagus, it enters the crop, and the crop is where the food is stored. It is then transported across into the stomach, which is this area right here, where the enzymes are added to the food, and then it passes to the back part of the stomach, which is known as the gizzard. The gizzard is where the food is ground up. Birds frequently will eat stones and gravel to provide, and their gizzard acts much like a rock polishing machine that polishes rocks. You put rocks you want to polish in with other materials that are rough, then this thing rolls and rolls and rolls and polishes the rock. It's the same thing as what happens in a bird. These gravel that they eat help them grind up the food that they've eaten. The intestine is where nutrients are absorbed. The liver produces bile, which aids in digestion, particularly fat digestion. And the cloaca, if I go back to this previous diagram, the cloaca, which is down here, is where all the wastes are eliminated. This is kidney waste as well as solid food waste. And it's also where the sexual gametes are released. In the area of the cloaca is an area called the bursa febris in the bird. This is where lymphocytes, which are immune cells, are produced. And this is actually where when we talk about B cells and T cells in humans, the B for B cell comes from the word bursa febris. The excretory system is also very much designed for efficiency. The urine is highly concentrated. The bird has a salt gland, which is a gland over the eyes in marine birds, which is the site of excess salt elimination. The respiratory system. The bird has lungs with air sacs. And there's an interesting thing about the way a bird breathes. A full cycle of a bird respiration is actually 2 inhalations. The first inhalation, the bird takes air into this air sac. The second inhalation, the bird transfers this air into the actual lungs where gas exchange occurs. And then the bird then eliminates the air out in the second exhalation. So the first step is the inhalation into the air sac. The second is the transfer into the lungs. The third is transfer back up into the air sacs and then out the trachea. The bird's voice box is called the syrinx, and each bird has a specialized syrinx to make the song that is unique to each bird species. The bird has a 4-chambered heart, which is efficiently pumps blood throughout the body. It's very much like other mammals. There are 2 sides to a closed circulation. One side is pulmonary, which means the blood circulates in the lungs back to the heart, back to the lungs, back to the heart. The other side is systemic, which is systemic, back to the heart, systemic. And the gas exchange occurs in the lungs, and this is a very efficient system. When I say it's a closed system, it means the blood always stays inside blood vessels and never leaves the blood vessels, and the exchange of oxygen in the tissues goes across the walls of the blood vessels. The heart rate of the bird is proportional to its size, so the smaller the bird, the slower the heart, or the smaller the bird, the faster the heart rate, the larger the bird, the slower the heart rate. And the blood of a bird is very much like mammals, except it has nucleated red blood cells instead of anucleated red blood cells. Birds do have one behavior that is unique to birds, which is migration. Migration is the annual moving from one region to another along specific paths. The birds gather in large gatherings of the same birds called a flock, and they fly in specific paths called flyways. And it's amazing that these birds will follow the same exact flyways in their migration patterns when they migrate. When birds decide to mate, they actually have a courtship. And courtship is finding a mate. It's usually associated with some degree of territoriality, which means that a male will stake out where it belongs and will chase off other males. And other males recognize this. And then there's also a means to recognize the proper male. And this is the example of how peacocks do it. A male peacock, the tail is a way for the female to recognize that this is a male peacock. The male is dominant in these relationships. So the fertilization occurs when sperm passes into the cloaca of the female, and the ovary produces the eggs, and the eggs are fertilized. This diagram is a diagram of the egg. The albumin of the egg, which is in this area right here, it's the white of the egg. There's actually thick albumin closer to the yolk and thin albumin on the outside. The egg itself is a single cell, and the ostrich egg is the largest single cell in creation. The yolk is a fat-rich food source for the embryo as it develops, and the embryo is this little spot right here called the germinal spot. This is where the embryo in a fertilized egg will develop. The shell is calcium carbonate and serves to protect the embryo, and the chalaza, which is this thick cord on either side of the yolk, supports the yolk and keeps it oriented in the same direction. Birds nest, and building a nest is a means in which the territory is selected and a mate is selected. And nesting, as well as migration, is an instinct, and an instinct is an unlearned knowledge which is possessed from birth. The incubation period of an egg is the time from fertilization to hatching, and during this time, the mother sits on the eggs and keeps them warm. There's an area of skin on the bird that is associated with when they sit on the egg, and it is specifically designed with blood vessels to produce heat. When a bird is born, it can either be atrial or precocial. Think of the word precocious, which means to be mature beyond your years. Precocial means able to run and swim immediately. So as soon as the bird is hatched, it is ready to go. Atrial, on the other hand, are hatchlings that are naked and defenseless at birth. The mother produces something known as crop milk, which actually comes from the crop, and the birds eat this early on, or the infant bird eats this early on until they become more mature and are able to eat more solid food.